So I'll just share a couple of slides, and I've got sort of, it's actually a presentation that we did for the LEP. So it might not cover everything you want to hear about, but I will go through it quickly and hopefully, can you, let's see.
Just before you do,
sorry.
That's okay. Yeah. No, what I'm going to do is Rebecca's paper is really interesting, so I'm going to share that with everyone at the end, and we'll have a chance to talk about it.
Okay.
So, and also, there's going to be a lot of technical stuff in here, so please just feel free to raise your hand as Poppy goes through it, and then Poppy, just call people in as you say.
Yeah. Okay. Let me make sure I can see everyone on my screen. Right. I think I can see everyone. But let me know if I've missed, if I'm not looking. So what our key messages were from the energy base really is that Dorset is quite a unique microcosm of future energy opportunities. So it has significant potential in all low carbon energy sectors. So we're talking here about solar, wind, onshore and offshore. We've got nuclear, whether or not we support that technology, but we also have marine sort of tidal opportunities. There's hydrogen opportunities. We've got old oil and gas, we've got oil and gas fields that need to be shut down, that could have potential for hydrogen and hydrogen storage or long-term energy storage. So actually, in terms of its resources and natural resources, Dorset's got a huge opportunity, and a lot of the key sectors that can benefit from this. So we've got a big defence sector, a big marine sector, a big ICT, so that's information technology. So these are all the things that the LEP are very interested in, and the councils will be interested in. These are the sectors that do the jobs and keep the economy running in Dorset. So our point is that these guys can take advantage of that. But it's got significant challenges. It's got the same challenges as everybody else in sort of heat and transportation. It's got a particular challenge with renewable energy, anything other than solar, and even solar, and that's the sort of the Navitas problem is quite big for Dorset, and it's also got problems with electric networks, so electrical network constraints. So actually adding new generation or demand is problematic at the moment in Dorset, although there's some national policy that might change that. If you wanted to stick an onshore wind farm in a great place in Dorset, you might not be able to anyway, because the network wouldn't be able to support that. So it has some significant challenges as well. So those were the sort of key messages. This is just a summary of the route to net zero that we've done in the report, which is hopefully a really snappy infographic, but I'm aware it's quite wordy. The pink bits are areas where we think there's particular opportunity for Dorset, and we go on to that when we talk about the investment opportunities. And you've got some of the summary in terms of, at the moment, about 5% of Dorset's energy demand is supplied from local generation, which is not very much, but there's potential in the future to have that as over 100%. And you can see along the top, we've got opportunities around the salt caverns in Portland, the offshore wind farm opportunity and solar opportunity. In the sort of medium and longer term, you might see small modular reactors, bioenergy and hydrogen. And on the bottom, you've got total energy demand at the moment. You've got the sort of move to electric vehicles, but a particular issue that I guess Planet Purbeck might not want to start thinking about is heating, so decarbonising heating. So EVs have got a pathway and national policy. Heating is much more of a tricky issue. So there's a document coming out next week, which is the government's heat and building strategy. So that might be, that's sort of putting out in advance of COP. So that might be an area to look at. And then you move into the hard to decarbonise areas of marine, aviation, agricultural machinery, quarrying machinery, things like that, which is sort of a challenge in the 2040s. But the 2030s is really going to be a year of, or hopefully late 2020s and 2030s will be about heat. So then there's another little infographic here about the Dorset's energy infrastructure, which is in the evidence space as well. And this just highlights some of the issues. I mean, all these little red dots are where your electrical network is constrained in Dorset, which you can see is pretty much everywhere. Sometimes for demand, you're okay, but for generation, if you wanted to do renewable generation, it's gonna cost you at the moment. And you've got quite a lot of, so there's some problems essentially, and you can see some of these are around the business part. So this is one of the things that the LEP were quite interested in terms of getting the right infrastructure in place for the shift that Dorset needs, because it's not there at the moment, but there are some changes that are coming up that might make a difference to that. And then, so on to the next part, which was the energy investment plan, which is the 10 project areas. And these were sort of, we spoke to a number of stakeholders, and we obviously have the evidence base, and they were prioritized based on these sort of 4 principles, which was about presenting a really significant challenge, presenting some quite immediate opportunities for Dorset in terms of investment and jobs, that they have a sort of whole system and infrastructure implication. So this is where I guess maybe less important to Planet Purbeck, but for the LEP in terms of where they might want to invest, it's sort of bang for buck. Is this really going to make a big difference, or is this just a project that's just going to help one particular area? At which point it's less, I guess, slightly less interesting to the LEP. And then they're subject to challenges which are delaying progress in Dorset. So the private sector can't unlock the problems that progress around this has got. And then this little infographic just summarizes what those are. I'll just move people across. So we identified, certainly for your renewable energy, there's a potential for perhaps a gigawatt further of more solar generation in Dorset. And that would be a useful number to head for. That's quite a lot. Quite a lot of that would be ground mount, some will be rooftop, and so it'd be different scales across Dorset, but given the irradiance and the location, it's a good place for solar. The offshore wind is a really significant opportunity for Dorset, and we suggested a gigawatt there as well. And those together by 2050 would pretty much cover the energy use in Dorset, and the offshore wind is the crucial part of that, because it generates a lot. Within that, we've also identified there's potential, this is more medium term, I guess, for shipping decarbonisation through hydrogen, heavy transport. So we suggested to the LEP and the councils there to start investigating the idea of a sort of cluster. So the idea behind that is that trying to get the big industries together and look at what the opportunities are, and whether they could do a demonstrator, whether there would be can they look at creating a cluster around hydrogen in Dorset, given its natural capital for that in sort of Portland and also the oil and gas fields. That wouldn't happen immediately, but there's a lot of innovation funding going out there at the moment. So that's something that the LEP would be interested in looking at. You've then got the next big thing, which is obviously the heat and buildings issue. So there were 2 parts of that. There's the sending the retrofit demand signal. So obviously until the government really get together on doing energy efficiency in a big way, the Green Homes Grant or something better comes back, and there's not that much you can do locally on energy efficiency other than just relying on people that are going to pay for it. But what we are suggesting here is that the public sector and the councils and the LEP get together and really start to send this retrofit demand signal, which builds up the capacity and the supply chain in Dorset to deliver this. Because even if you wanted to get all your houses energy efficiency retrofit for all your houses, there would not be the skilled people out there to deliver that for you. The builders do not know how to do it because there hasn't been demand for it. So the idea here is to really try and build demand and then build a supply chain so people know what to do and can deliver it. And that's sort of what they can do in the meantime while waiting for a government strategy that addresses the big question about funding that. And then the second two bits we were suggesting, mainly for BCP and Dorset to look at, were larger scale heat decarbonisation projects, sort of demonstrator projects. So one we thought would be the marine source heat. So given the closeness to the sea of a lot of towns and cities in Dorset, marine source heat could be a really interesting sector for Dorset. And there's one sort of touted in Poole at the moment. So they could build up a sort of an industry and experience and skills around that. And also the off-gas areas in Dorset, there could be potential for like a net zero village. So there's a number of local authorities across the country have been looking at how to basically take areas that are currently off gas and put them all onto a sort of heat network, a decarbonised heat network. And there's a couple of projects going ahead. So it would be nice to see the Dorset version of that. I think I talk also about the sort of smart, flexible networks, and strategic network investments is two of those, which may not be quite of much interest to Planet Purbeck, but the final area was around decarbonising transport. Now, as we've said, we believe EV is sort of happening, so there's not that much that people need to do other than sort of talk about it and try and get people to take them up. But specific to Dorset, there may be things like filling the gaps in public EV charging. So you've got some challenges around seasonal traffic to areas that might not have great electricity, public EV charging and things like that. And then the second one is around the bus decarbonisation. So rail, again, is sort of national, and that's going to be going ahead in some form. But the bus is local. And so what is the bus decarbonisation strategy in Dorset? And they've got those 3 bus companies that are running diesel buses at the moment. And obviously we want them to be probably electric. And what's the strategy to achieve that? So some of those companies have promised to go net zero in other places, but have not promised that in Dorset. So then there's a sort of pressure that the LEP and the council should be putting on those companies. So that is the quick run through. I can go into more detail on each of those, but I'm not sure they're all of similar interest. So perhaps have a discussion about which you'd like me to go into a bit more detail about, or broader questions perhaps at this stage. I'll just stop sharing. So, if I can remember how to. No. There
we go.
There.
Well, first of all, thank you, Poppy.
Yeah, I hope that wasn't too techy.
No, it was very kind of clearly and logically outlined. Heidi's only here till 1:45, and I want to make sure we have time for Rebecca's paper before we do that. So let's just have a 10-minute discussion on that, and then we'll go to Rebecca's paper. Kind of first question for me really is, what kind of grassroots community pressure group like Planet Purbeck do to support what you do? And the caveat to that is that the majority of us are volunteers and time poor, etc. So we can't do everything. So yeah.
I mean, I think I was wondering about this. I mean, I think there's a general message, I guess, that about getting across the opportunities of this and encouraging Dorset to take the opportunities of the green transition in what you're talking about. And I guess the problem is that often we talk to people who are as committed as us to green things, but a lot of people are interested in jobs and the economy and how that's going to support them and what they want to do in their livelihoods. And so it can be a really important way to get people on board who are a bit less up for this. And I guess the point that we were trying to make, particularly in Dorset, given that it can be quite conservative and quite backward looking sort of politically, is that they're missing out potentially on some huge opportunities. And I guess that's the sort of narrative that it would be good to sort of sow around the place to get people a little bit more up for the transition, and people that may not just care about climate change enough to want to do it anyway. I think there's a couple of other things. So the particular issue that we've got for Dorset is the sort of CPRE problem, the very anti-wind, anti-renewables lobby. And so obviously part of that, of countering that, is that sort of economic message. It's going, what you want to keep this county backwards. You want to not take the opportunities when everybody else wants to take these opportunities, and it's going. So that's part of it. But I do think a little bit more of a, so potentially sort of laying the ground for changes to come, and trying to get more people on board with going, oh, okay, I don't like the look of an offshore wind farm, but I know that it's needed. It would be the sort of place that you want to get people to. So I think offshore wind is a particular issue. You've got the developers for Navitas were spent millions and then got turned down right at the end because of this sort of anti-movement, which means actually trying to attract this investment into Dorset and into Purbeck will be really hard, because those developers at the moment don't want to touch it with a barge pole. They would develop anywhere but Dorset because they think they'll lose their money. So there's quite a lot of sort of on the ground work to be done to get the sort of get more people behind that and more people acceptance of that. And I'm a big believer in that politicians follow groundswell rather than the other way around. So, and before say a project comes, this is really important, before a project comes along. So once a project's there, you've got to focus for anti. But while you can still talk about it in a sort of general sense, you might have more opportunities just to have an open discussion about things, because they're not being faced with an immediate threat of Navitas Bay getting built. So I think there might be some opportunities around, I was thinking setting up on the beach one Sunday and going to tourists, what do you think if you could see on a clear day some offshore wind times, what would that do to, what would you feel about that? So sort of things like that would be quite valuable, because a lot of the antis are about how it's going to affect tourism, how people are going to hate it, and just sort of trying to illustrate support for the technology, I think would be quite useful. And that's for offshore and onshore. Solar, you've got less of a problem, but you still get, I think there's a new 50 megawatt one. So there's one 50 megawatt one that got approved by the council, and there's one that's looking a little bit more dodgy because of people not supporting it. And so again, even with solar, you might need some more education, I guess, and understanding. So that would be, and I guess the second thing would be about heat. So you've got a load of members, and heat is the new big, it's going to be the new big thing. So the new strategy coming out next week is going to maybe put a date on your gas boiler, might say from it's quite a long time, but 2035, you can't have a new gas boiler. So it's really going to start to ramp up that discussion about what are people going to replace their heat with. And so I would have thought, in terms of an actual project, I mean, I don't know if you've heard of places like Swaffham Prior, this sort of net zero village. So they're switching 200 off-gas houses onto a heat pump heat network. And it's taken ages, and it's quite hard work. But I would have thought there were places in Dorset that might just be interested in understanding what they could do as a community, and whether they can do something more cheaply if they do it together. So there's the sort of focus on off-gas areas, I guess, that might be interesting to Purbeck, because I'm sure there's quite a lot of communities that will be starting to ask that question when the heat and building strategy comes out, because I expect we're going to see thereafter your gas boiler is going to take it out by 2035 stuff. So yes, that would be my recommendations. Mary.
Yeah, I just want to say that this advice is just golden. I've just been writing down furiously, just because going forwards, Planet Purbeck, we've worked incredibly hard. Now we want to work smarter, not harder. And, you know, just some brilliant advice here about laying the ground early, demonstrating support for something, having open conversations. We've been burnt in the past by backing something really hard, and then the community overreact or react as you'd expect them to. Politicians probably,
for the offshore wind, what I've said to Dorset Council, who are more supportive than BCP, I don't know if anyone's got any movements in BCP, but at the moment Dorset are quite positive, BCP are less positive. What I've said to them is that they need to develop a prospectus, like a local prospectus that goes, we, Dorset, would support an offshore farm under these conditions. So it would be interesting to sort of identify what those conditions are. So does it need to be a little bit further offshore? Does it need to have, you know, make sure that it's got local sourcing, so all the jobs stay in Dorset? You know, what are the conditions under which that support could be built? And I think that's quite important to try and, you know, proactively identify the sort of projects that you'd want in Dorset, rather than having to react to a big developer coming on going, we're going to do this. Sorry.
No, more golden advice. The only last thing I'd say is just the missing out narrative. I just haven't been able to think of something that would appeal to conservatives and people that like to support business over everything else. That's brilliant. And then just focusing on the opportunities of green transition rather than all the kind of doom and gloom. So brilliant. Thank you for dropping by and all this advice. I'm going to just have 5 minutes Q&A, and then we'll move over to Rebecca's report or note. Mary,
campaign team. It's not me personally.
Yeah, campaign. Sorry. Mary, then Helen.
Just a point on EV, because that is at the moment, as you said, a good pathway. Could we build on that by saying, if you get your vehicle and you could then have solar panels so you can run your car free, but actually it's a backdoor into them having heating via solar panels, rather than at the moment it's solar panels have got this thing about they're expensive and they can't afford it and everything else. But actually, if you take it off the cost of a car, and it also attracts a different audience. So just wondering whether that would help.
Yeah.
And also in terms of chargers, I think there needs to be something at council level, which is the kind of charger they're going to put in, because there's a company at the moment putting in 150 gigawatts watts to you know, because they're much faster and they'll be more effective. And councils are still putting in low power chargers, which really aren't any good.
Well, it may depend on where and what the network's like. So you can't just draw 150 kilowatts anywhere in the middle of a town. So it will depend on the sort of things they're putting in. And I mean, yeah, absolutely, EVs are a good way in. Just on the solar, actually, interestingly, there's, because of the shift in prices of the energy bills, you should find, so I have a system which does my hot water as well. So it's a panel, but it does its excess into the hot water. And that used to not be worth it, because you're buying your gas at 3p and you're selling your electricity on a seg at 5.5. So actually, it's good for carbon, but it's not good for money. But that's just shifted. So you'll now find, if you use your solar for heating, if you've got a hot water tank, heating a hot water tank, I'm now paying 7 for my gas and for getting 5.5. So it's just switched over in terms of the economics of solar. You wouldn't use a solar panel for your heating, though. You're going to have to go heat pump. It can contribute to some of the electricity that heat pump uses, but it won't contribute that much, because it's not going to be sunny at the right time here, unfortunately.
But at least it's
all day.
That start, isn't it? It's a start of people thinking differently.
Certainly, solar rooftop is the one big thing individuals can do now, and they can do it themselves with no particular, you know. Yes, I mean, I still think solar rooftops are great, and EVs are great, but yeah, in terms of really trying to move things forward, EVs are moving forward with or without your help, I guess. And obviously you can amplify that message, but
it's
there's so much
piggybacking on it for other things.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mary. Good questions. Let's move to Helen. I'm also keen to hear from Heidi, because I know you've had some questions as well. So we'll go Helen, Heidi, Rebecca, then Kathy.
Poppy, what's your view on local energy clubs? Because there's one that is being mooted for Swanage as a start.
Yes, local energy clubs. I find myself quite torn. I lead the Ofgem, work with Ofgem for Regen, and so I know that how this actually works when you get down to the basic economics of who's making money and where. And the energy clubs are very niche. So as in, you need a supplier that's going to give up part of their margin, and suppliers don't make very much. However much we're told they do, they don't. And so it's not something at the moment as a model that is something you can roll out nationally. You can make it work in specific locations. I know Bridport's done it, and Energy Local are very keen on getting this rolled out in different places, but it's niche. We've spoken to Octopus, who run that for Bridport, I think. They do it on a spreadsheet. They've got like Kraken, which is their amazing billing system, but they have to support these clubs on a spreadsheet. It's costly for them to do it. So unless there's a change, and we want to talk to Ofgem about changes to the supplier license, so I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying in terms of what Regen see, that is not the future, because it's not something you can put out everywhere. It's not something that works across the country. And there are some big regulatory problems with making that happen at the moment. But that's not to say that we don't want to see more local energy and more local balancing. I'm not convinced that that's the model that will deliver it, but it may be a similar model to that, if you see what I mean. So it's a bit of a nuanced response to that.
Yeah, that's really useful. Thanks for asking that question, Helen. Have you got more? I'm just aware we need to move around.
No. That's the only thing I was going to say is that about the what Mary was saying about Scotland. I understand that there is a discount in England as well, and I understand there's on the car, and there's a discount on your charger. Mm-hmm. You can claim that back as well. Yeah, there's the interest free isn't. But there is also interest-free or low-interest loans available for people to fit solar panels and so on through Dorset Council. Mm-hmm. So there is some sort of funding available for those. That's long-term funding.
Great. Could you email that to me, just so we can collect that and?
Yeah. I'll pull up the relevant
thank you.
web pages. And
Heidi.
Good news, my meeting got pushed back till 12, so I can stay for another 15 minutes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I think, the main question I had today was probably just thinking about how can we support this? And I think, Poppy's really answered that already. It seems like it's education and awareness and galvanizing positive support. So thinking about how we kind of seed that into what we're talking about over the next year, really, and try and keep that as a key pillar of our social media comms, the kind of stuff that we're sharing on social, try and have things consistent with these positive messages.
Thanks, Heidi. Rebecca, then Kathy, then Tom.
You know that. Thank you, Poppy. That was really, really good. I enjoyed that. I'm a big picture person, so I'm always in favour of things that we can do locally that resonate with the big picture. And the big picture is we need to degrow. Whatever you call it, we just got to use less. So for me, of the sort of issues you were raising, the insulation is the one that rings a lot of bells for me, because that's about using less energy. I personally would be less interested in promoting electric vehicles, because electric vehicles are absolutely the best solution in a limited number of circumstances, because actually public transport or active transport are way better than electric vehicles in most situations. So the insulation, I think, is something would be really good for us to get behind, Rob. And I've put a link in the chat. The New Economics Foundation are just starting to run a campaign on that as well. So if we wanted information to support our local campaign, we could pull it out of the New Economics Foundation stuff. They've done a lot of really, really good stuff. They've been around for decades. So, and a couple of, yeah, and I absolutely agree, Poppy, public debate is the key issue. On that, I wanted a couple of minor points. They've said they're going to stop selling gas boilers unless they are hydrogen ready. And the story I saw in the paper that there are practically no boilers currently on sale that are not hydrogen ready. So this banning of gas boilers is more hot air than substance.
Well, that's, I mean, possibly. I mean, the government's, they're being heavily lobbied by the fossil fuel industry to maintain this as a hydrogen boiler. But more and more, I mean, Regen's view is the same. More and more, the evidence is coming out that this is ludicrous, essentially, to use hydrogen for heating and to use hydrogen for domestic vehicles is just, I found a great article actually on LinkedIn yesterday that sort of laid out why it is ludicrous. So that will be discovered sooner rather than later, we believe. But this is not to say there isn't a role for hydrogen. So I know there's a short-term danger in there, but long-term it will be electrifying heat. So I think that the point at the moment is to not conflate the two as equal solutions, because one is fanciful and future and doesn't exist, and one exists now, and so they shouldn't be talked about as oh, it could be hydrogen or electric. You just go, well, the only solution actually is electric, and we will wait. You can see in 10 years' time you could shift. The issue is, though, is both of them require. So the idea, the economics behind hydrogen is that if you're capturing carbon or however you're making it, it's significantly more expensive than just direct electric heating. Both of them are going to require enormous amounts of insulation. And by the time you've put enormous amounts of insulation in your home, you might as well have electric heating. So hydrogen is not. So it needs to be given relatively short shrift, and more evidence is coming out to show that hydrogen isn't a solution for heating. So I do think that will start to fall off at the moment. But yes, they're pushing hard. The fossil fuel companies are pushing hard.
When you said it was a ludicrous policy, my initial reaction was it sounds exactly the sort of policy that. No, let's not go with that one.
I think I'll send the article.
Sorry, I just want to make a quick point on the offshore wind. The story about that what we should stop offshore wind was that it was going to reduce tourism in Swanage by 35%. Now, the people who were saying that they didn't want offshore wind because it would put off tourists are not the people that say, oh, good, we've got lots of tourists. They're the people that say, ruddy tourists, throw their litter, block the roads. So I don't think that was the real reason for the objection. We can speculate about what the real reason is, but I think if we go with the narrative that that's the real reason, we're going off on a false trail.
Yes, no, I agree. I think there's lots of reasons. I think the big one is the economic. So what we've put in the report around offshore wind is essentially that is the difference between Dorset being a hub of future technologies, and once you've got an excess of renewable generation, you can get your hydrogen, you can decarbonize your ports, you've got all sorts of opportunities that you can grab. Without that, you're an energy importer. You're not grabbing the opportunities of the future, and it really is the sort of it really does make the difference between Dorset grabbing opportunities and Dorset staying behind. And so that's the narrative we think we need to go with. But there are still, I saw Meridian News talking about the extension to Rampion, and there was someone going, they're going to lose 3,000 tourist jobs, which is completely ludicrous. But I think you still need to rebut that, because people will talk about it. So I think each of the different issues that they've got, you need to have a sort of response to, and things like a survey or whatever that you could do on a summer's day would just help, you know, make people that are claiming that sort of thing look like they're making stuff up, which is what they are.
Thank you, Rebecca. Excellent questions, brilliant responses. Thank you. Great point about the objections, and those people that are saying it's going to damage tourism clearly don't want the tourists either. That's and also the great point about insulation. That's probably a topic for another time, but I think we do need to focus on that, certainly. I do want to bring in the campaign report at 1:45, so you've got 2 minutes, Kathy and Tom. Sorry.
It's just a very quick one. I just wanted to ask about Ecotricity's suggestion of biogas from grass, and whether you thought what you thought about that, really.
You know, we've got someone looking into that. In some rural locations, possibly, but you've got so many competing needs for land that I haven't seen the calculations behind that and how much land use that would require, and I would suggest it's a lot. So possibly it could be a solution for some people, but it would not be everyone's solution, would be my suggestion. So yes, it needs more interrogation.
Thank you both. Tom, you can say it can wait. Tom, is that what you're saying? Yeah, I can't. You're
on mute.
I just love it when very experienced Zoomers do that.
I'm being caught out on mute. Yeah, no, carry on.
Okay,
Don't
cool.
worry.
Right, let's share the campaign report. Poppy, do you want to stick around to see what we're going to do?
If it's useful, but otherwise I can.
We'll just give you insight to what
okay, yeah, it'd be interesting
group is planning to do. But if you've got high-level things to do, then we won't take offence if you go.